stop what you are doing right now. Because what I am about to share in the next 25 minutes could be the most important health conversation you have never had with your doctor. Let me tell you about Sandra Holloway, 67 years old, retired postal worker from Richmond, Virginia. Sharp, independent, still driving herself everywhere, still cooking Sunday dinner for her 3 grandchildren. Sandra did everything her doctor told her, took every medication faithfully, never missed a dose. She was what most people would call a model patient. Then something changed, quietly, slowly. Her ankles were swelling by afternoon. Climbing her front porch steps left her breathless. One evening, washing the dinner dishes, her heart started pounding in a way that terrified her. The emergency room found something Sandra never expected. The danger had been hiding inside the very medications she had trusted to protect her. I am Dr. William Lee, and I have spent over 2 decades studying how common medications interact with the aging body. Today I am walking you through 5 specific types of drugs that research has linked to increased cardiovascular risk in adults over 60. And I am saving the most shocking for last. Because number 1 on this list is something so universally trusted, so deeply embedded in the daily routine of American seniors, that when you hear it, you may need a moment to process it. Before we continue, this is for educational purposes only. Please do not stop any medication without speaking with your physician first. What I want to give you today is the knowledge to have a better, more informed conversation with your healthcare team. Drop your age in the comments right now. I read every single one, and I want to know exactly who I am talking to today. Here is what most people are never told. Your body at 65 is not simply an older version of your body at 45. It is a fundamentally different operating system. Your liver, which breaks down every medication you take, now operates at roughly 60 to 65% of its former efficiency. Your kidneys lose approximately 1% of their filtering capacity every year after 40. By 65, they may be working at half of what they once were. And your blood vessels, particularly that delicate inner lining called the endothelium, have become stiffer, more sensitive, and far less forgiving. What does this mean practically? A medication prescribed 5 years ago, at the same dose, taken the same way, can now behave very differently inside your body. Not because the pill changed, because you did. And yet, millions of Americans over 60 continue taking the same prescriptions written years ago without anyone reviewing whether they still fit the body that exists today. Johns Hopkins University researchers found that standard adult dosing was calibrated primarily on younger populations. The aging body, with its slower clearance rates and more sensitive cardiovascular system, was simply not the reference point. So, right now, a normal dose may be functioning like a much higher dose in your system. Let us begin the countdown. I am going from 5 to 1, and the most important is at the end. Stay with me. Number 5, NSAIDs. That stands for non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. Ibuprofen, naproxen, Advil, Aleve. More than 40% of adults over 65 use these regularly, often daily for joint pain, back pain, arthritis. And most people think of them as harmless maintenance. Here is what is happening inside your body. NSAIDs block certain enzymes involved in inflammation. But those same enzymes also keep your blood vessels relaxed and your kidneys in proper balance. Block them, and 2 things happen. First, your blood vessels subtly tighten. Blood pressure rises. Not dramatically, not in a way you feel on any given day, but consistently, silently, over time. Second, your kidneys retain more sodium and water. Fluid accumulates. Your heart now has to push a larger volume of blood through slightly narrower vessels. Think of your blood vessels like a garden hose. Fully open, water flows freely, but squeeze the hose while filling it with more water, and the pressure building inside becomes dangerous. That is exactly what regular NSAID use does to an aging cardiovascular system. A study published in the British Medical Journal found that regular NSAID users over 60 had a 23% higher rate of cardiovascular events compared to those who found alternatives, nearly 1 in 4. Do you take ibuprofen or naproxen at least once a week? If the answer is yes, this is the conversation to have with your doctor. Ask about topical anti-inflammatory creams applied directly to the painful joint. Ask about acetaminophen at appropriate doses. Ask about omega-3 fatty acids and turmeric, both of which have genuine evidence for inflammation reduction without the cardiovascular load. The conversation is worth having before your body has it for you. Number 4. Benzodiazepines. You know them as Valium, Ativan, Xanax. Prescribed for anxiety, for sleep, for the restlessness that sometimes comes with age. They work. That calming effect is real. And that is exactly why so many older adults have been taking them for years, sometimes decades, without anyone suggesting a second look. Here is what is happening underneath. Benzodiazepines slow down the central nervous system, and that slowing extends beyond the brain. After 60, the body processes these drugs far more slowly. The same dose that felt calibrated at 55 may be functioning 2 or 3 times as strong at 70 because it accumulates in the system. The sedative effect deepens. Movement decreases, breathing becomes shallower, and reduced movement means reduced circulation. Think of your circulation like a river. Rivers stay healthy when they keep moving. When flow slows, sediment settles. Night after night, with reduced respiratory depth and less physical movement, the cardiovascular system is working under conditions it was never meant to sustain long-term. Research from Johns Hopkins shows that long-term benzodiazepine use in adults over 60 significantly worsens sleep apnea, a condition where breathing stops repeatedly during the night. Every pause is a mini oxygen crisis for the heart. Multiply that by dozens of times per night, across months and years, and the cumulative burden is substantial. If you have been taking a sleep or anxiety medication regularly, the question to bring to your doctor is this: given how my body processes medications now versus when this was first prescribed, is this dose still appropriate? Not whether you should stop, whether the dose still fits. Number 3. This one comes from the cold and allergy aisle, and it surprises people precisely because it does not feel like a cardiovascular medication at all. Decongestants. Products containing pseudoephedrine or phenylephrine. Sudafed and any combination cold product with a D on the label. Decongestants work by constricting blood vessels in your nasal passages to reduce swelling. But your blood vessels do not have a zip code. When those vessels constrict in your nose, they constrict throughout your entire body. Blood pressure rises, heart rate increases. The heart pushes harder against tighter resistance. Now consider that many people over 60 are also taking blood pressure medication. When they add a decongestant during cold season, they are pressing the accelerator and the brake simultaneously, with the heart in the middle of that conflict. A study published in the American Heart Association Journal found that adults over 60 with existing cardiovascular risk factors experience blood pressure spikes averaging 19 points systolic from pseudoephedrine-containing products. 19 points in a body where the margin for safe fluctuation is already narrower. The practical answer is simple. Keep saline nasal spray on hand. Read every cold and sinus label before you take it. If you see pseudoephedrine, phenylephrine, or a D designation, set it aside and choose a decongestant-free alternative. Your pharmacist can help you identify them in under 2 minutes. We have 3 down. Number 2 is coming, and it involves something almost universally considered gentle and protective. And then number 1, the one that will surprise you most. Stay with me. Number 2, proton pump inhibitors. Omeprazole, sold as Prilosec. Esomeprazole, sold as Nexium. Lansoprazole, sold as Prevacid. Among the most widely prescribed and most widely purchased over-the-counter medications in the United States. Taken daily by millions of people for acid reflux, heartburn, and stomach protection. They feel safe. They feel like responsible maintenance. Do you take an acid reducer every day? Have you been taking one for more than 6 months? If yes, the next 2 minutes are specifically for you. Here is what most people never learn about stomach acid. We have been trained to think of it as the enemy, but stomach acid is not just there to cause discomfort. It plays a critical role in absorbing specific nutrients that your heart and blood vessels depend on. Think of your stomach as a combination lock. The right amount of acid opens the lock, releasing magnesium, calcium, and vitamin B12 from food into your bloodstream. When proton pump inhibitors reduce stomach acid over extended periods, they partially close that lock. The nutrients are still in the food. Your body simply cannot fully access them. Magnesium plays a direct role in maintaining stable heart rhythm. Low magnesium levels can trigger irregular heartbeats, muscle weakness, and elevated blood pressure. Research from Johns Hopkins found that adults over 60 who had taken proton pump inhibitors continuously for more than 12 months had magnesium levels that were, on average, 14% lower than those not taking the medication. Calcium balance affects how the muscles surrounding your blood vessels contract and relax. Vitamin B12 is directly involved in maintaining the health of the endothelium, that inner arterial lining we discussed earlier. When B12 is chronically low, the endothelium becomes more prone to the inflammatory damage that leads to arterial disease. There is one more layer. Recent research suggests that proton pump inhibitors may also interfere with the production of nitric oxide, the primary chemical your blood vessels use to relax and widen. Less nitric oxide means stiffer vessels, more cardiovascular strain, and most people taking these medications have no idea this is occurring. This is where Sandra Holloway's story connects directly. Sandra had been taking omeprazole every single morning for 4.5 years. Her doctor had started it when she was taking ibuprofen for a shoulder injury to protect her stomach from NSAID irritation. That was sound reasoning, but the shoulder healed. The ibuprofen was discontinued. The omeprazole continued because no one reviewed it, because it had become part of the routine, because it never caused any obvious problems. When Sandra arrived in the emergency room that evening, a comprehensive blood panel showed her magnesium was critically low and her B12 was borderline deficient. The combination of those deficiencies, layered on years of subtly elevated blood pressure from prior NSAID use, had created the cardiovascular stress that landed her in that hospital bed. Sandra looked at me and said, "I was doing everything right. I was taking my medications every single day." She paused. And then she said, "Nobody ever told me that doing everything right could still be the wrong thing for my body right now. If you take a proton pump inhibitor daily, ask your doctor 2 things. First, do I still need this? And if so, could a lower or more intermittent dose work? Second, should we check my magnesium and B12 levels? Both are simple blood tests. The results could tell you a great deal. Now, number 1. I want you to understand what makes this final medication different from everything else we have discussed today. Everything else carries some level of awareness in health conversations. People understand at some level that sleep pills are powerful and that ibuprofen has limits, but number 1 has been actively promoted as a cardiovascular protector. Number 1 is taken specifically because people believe it is helping their heart. It sits on the nightstand next to a glass of water. It is the first thing some people do every single morning. And for a specific, very large population of people over 60, the research is now clear that this protection is far less universal than once believed, and that for many, the risk may quietly exceed the benefit. Number 1, low-dose aspirin, what is commonly called baby aspirin. 81 milligrams, taken daily. I need to be precise here because this is genuinely nuanced. For people who have already had a heart attack or stroke, or who have specific high-risk cardiovascular conditions, low-dose aspirin remains an important and evidence-supported therapy. If your physician prescribed aspirin for those reasons, please do not change anything based on this video alone. That decision requires your individual medical history. This is for the tens of millions of Americans over 60 who started aspirin preventively, who heard, at some point in the last 20 years, that a daily aspirin was good for the heart, who were told casually or decided on their own to simply take one every day, just in case. Because for that group, the evidence has fundamentally shifted. Aspirin works by making your platelets less sticky, reducing the likelihood of clots forming inside arteries. In a person with documented cardiovascular damage, that anti-clotting effect is genuinely protective. But clotting is not only something bad. Clotting is also how your body stops bleeding when a vessel is damaged. When aspirin reduces clotting ability in an aging body with more fragile blood vessels and a thinner, more vulnerable digestive lining, the risk of internal bleeding increases significantly. There are 2 types of stroke: ischemic stroke, caused by a clot-blocking blood flow to the brain, and hemorrhagic stroke, caused by bleeding in the brain. Aspirin reduces the risk of the first kind, but it increases the risk of the second, And after 60, in a person without a prior cardiovascular event, that balance shifts. The Aspirin trial, published in the New England Journal of Medicine, followed over 19,000 adults over 65 without prior cardiovascular disease. Half took daily low-dose aspirin, half took a placebo. The results were striking. There was no significant reduction in heart attacks or strokes in the aspirin group, but there was a meaningfully higher rate of major bleeding events, and all-cause mortality was actually higher in the aspirin group. As a result, the United States Preventive Services Task Force now advises against initiating low-dose aspirin for primary cardiovascular prevention in adults over 60. This is not a refinement of old guidance. It is a reversal. And yet, millions of Americans are still taking aspirin every morning based on recommendations that predated this data. James Whitfield was 74 years old, a retired military officer from Tampa, Florida. James started aspirin in his mid-50s after a colleague had a heart attack. His doctor at the time did not discourage it, and so James took it for 20 years, faithfully, every single morning, as part of what he called his health armor. At 74, James had a hemorrhagic stroke. When his neurologist reviewed his full medication history, the aspirin was among the first items addressed. James told me afterward that he felt a particular kind of grief about it. He said he had been diligently doing something for 2 decades that may have contributed to the very event he had been trying to prevent. James recovered. He is doing well today, and he asked me to share his story so that others can have the conversation he never had. The question to ask your physician is simple and direct. Given my age, my complete cardiovascular history, and the current evidence base, is daily low-dose aspirin still appropriate for me specifically? Not as a general aspirin question. As a question about your body, your history, your risk profile right now, type yes. In the comments, if you are going to bring up at least one of these 5 medications at your next appointment. I want to see how many of you are walking away from this with something specific to act on. Now let us bring everything together into something you can actually use. We have covered 5 medication categories. NSAIDs, which can silently raise blood pressure and increase fluid retention by interfering with the same enzymes that protect your vessels and kidneys. Benzodiazepines, which accumulate in the aging body to amplified levels, reduce circulation, and worsen breathing issues during sleep. Decongestants containing pseudoephedrine, which constrict blood vessels system-wide and can spike blood pressure in ways that work directly against cardiovascular medications. Proton pump inhibitors, which can deplete the magnesium, calcium, and B12 your heart depends on, while also interfering with the nitric oxide system that keeps your arteries flexible. And low-dose aspirin, which for adults over 60 without prior cardiovascular disease may no longer provide the heart protection once assumed, while carrying a meaningfully elevated bleeding risk that current medical guidelines now recognize. Here is what to do with this. Not panic, not stop anything on your own. Bring 3 specific questions to your next appointment. Question 1. Is everything I am currently taking still appropriate for my body as it is today? This single question shifts the visit from adding prescriptions to evaluating existing ones. Question 2. For each medication, what was the original reason it was prescribed, and does that reason still apply? This catches everything started for a temporary problem and never reconsidered. Question 3. Are there any nutrient levels, specifically magnesium, B12, and calcium, that should be monitored given what I am taking? Simple blood tests can reveal deficiencies before they become cardiovascular events. 3 questions. Write them down before your next appointment. Bring the list. Any physician who genuinely cares about your health will welcome a patient asking exactly these things. Beyond the appointment, there are things you can do right now. Keep saline nasal spray on hand instead of decongestant products. Read labels on cold medications before you take them. If you use NSAIDs regularly, ask a pharmacist today about topical alternatives for joint pain. Check the date your acid reducer was first prescribed and ask whether the original reason for it still exists. I also want to say something about why these situations happen at all, because it matters. The problem is not that these medications are bad. The problem is that the healthcare system is extraordinarily good at starting treatments and much less structured around systematically revisiting them. The average physician visit in the United States lasts between 15 and 17 minutes. In that time, new symptoms must be addressed, vitals reviewed, concerns answered. A careful review of every existing prescription against an aging body that has changed significantly since each one was written does not fit into that window unless the patient specifically asks for it. That means the responsibility for initiating this review falls to you. And now you have the knowledge to do it. Let me finish Sandra's story. 3 months after that frightening evening in the emergency room in Richmond, Virginia, Sandra Holloway walked into her cardiologist's office for a follow-up. Her medications had been carefully reviewed. The omeprazole was discontinued because the original reason for it, stomach protection during NSAID use, had long since ceased to be relevant. Her magnesium was supplemented under medical guidance until her levels normalized. Her blood pressure was managed with a single medication at a lower dose than before because the compounding burden of the other drugs had been removed. Sandra is walking 2 miles every morning again. She drove herself to that follow-up appointment. When I last spoke with her, she said she feels more like herself than she has in 4 years. And the thing she keeps coming back to, the thing she most wants other people to hear, is this. All of it started with a conversation. Just one conversation where someone finally sat down with her and looked at everything with fresh eyes. That conversation is available to you. Today, this week, at your very next appointment. You now have 3 questions to start it. Here is what I want you to do right now. First, drop a comment and tell me which of these 5 medications surprised you most. Was it aspirin? Was it the acid reducers? And tell me which one you are going to bring up with your doctor first. I respond to as many comments as I possibly can, and I genuinely want to know. Second, if this gave you something useful, please share it with someone you care about who is over 60 and on daily medications. This conversation could matter enormously to your spouse, your neighbor, a friend who has never had anyone review everything they are taking. Sharing takes 10 seconds. The impact on someone you love could be far greater than that. Third, subscribe and turn on notifications if you have not already. Every week we release new content built on real research, explained clearly, for people who are serious about understanding their health at this stage of life. Next week, I am covering the specific nutrient deficiencies most likely to affect cardiovascular function after 60, including what levels to look for and exactly what to do if your results come back low. You will not want to miss it. To every person watching right now who has been managing health challenges for years, who has felt dismissed by doctors who never had enough time, who has taken medications faithfully and still seen things decline, I want to say this as directly as I know how. Do not let anyone tell you it is too late, because it is not. Sandra is walking 2 miles every morning in Richmond, Virginia. She is 67 years old, and she has more energy today than she did at 63. Not from a miracle, from a conversation. Because someone finally looked at everything with her and asked the right questions. You can have that conversation. Your body has not given up on you, and neither have I. Thank you for being here. I will see you in the next one.